Hi everyone. Okay, so today we are speaking to women of North Africa, and they are a platform dedicated to conversations around and art around North African women. I will just request them and we'll go from there. It's been a while since I've hosted a Roots introduction, or Roots introducing rather. It's nice to be back.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
How are you?
I'm good. I'm a bit
I'm
nervous.
good, thank you. How are you? Don't be. It's a relaxed
Yeah, because
conversation. That's
I'm
it.
like an Instagram live, so it's like a bit strange for me.
Yeah, no, it was like that at the start, but it's just think of it as a conversation. Think of
Okay,
it
that
like a
works.
FaceTime call. Um, yeah, so how are
I'm
you?
good. A little bit tired. Had a hectic week. How about you?
Yeah, good. I'm good, thank you. We're working on quite a few bits of Roots at the minute. We've got an event coming
Okay,
up
is
that
it in
we're
London?
announcing soon, so just busy with that.
Oh,
It's an online event, so we'll be. It's
okay.
all
Well,
coming
I'll
soon.
be I'll be staying
It's all
tuned.
waiting to be confirmed. Awesome. So just to start with, could you just introduce yourself
Yes.
and what you
My name
do?
is Nanda. I'm 25 years old. I'm mostly a student. I founded Women of North Africa, I think probably about 5 years ago now, so it's been around for a while. But I think it launched like
Hmm.
3 odd years ago, and it's been sort of up and
Yeah,
down since. I think with Roots Journal, like sometimes it's like a side project and it takes
yeah,
a lot of time and energy, and you have like your stuff on the side as
yeah.
well, so it's like it's hard.
No, definitely, definitely it is. It can be. But it's part of the
Yeah,
journey, I
it's
guess.
it's especially when it's
It's
something that you're
all
passionate about, it
worth
doesn't
it.
really you're just passionate about it, like you're just so motivated to do it, and it you you kind
Yeah,
of find the time and the energy to do it, but sometimes there's the roadblocks all the time, and it's hard.
yeah. Of course, of course. So before we get into the actual Roots introducing questions, what inspired you to start Women of
um
NA?
Probably my family. I grew up in a
Yeah,
really like female dominated family, like it's pretty much matriarchy, and I just wanted to sort of honor the women in my family and communicate
yeah,
sort of the love that I have for Algerian women, for North African women, and like bring them together in a project that to sort of cultivate a sense of solidarity between all of us, because I feel like there's lots of really dumb things, like for example, for people who live in diaspora, sometimes you have like diaspora wars, or or even back
yeah,
home
yeah,
there's like certain conflicts between certain countries, but it's like really stupid political stuff. And I think I just wanted to show women that regardless of which country they come from in North Africa, that
yeah,
we're more alike than people would that than you would think. That we have similar struggles, we have the same sort of we
hmm,
still have to fight the patriarchy regardless. It's an international thing. And so it's just to show them
yeah,
that, we're alike, and so we should stick together and figure out how we're going to deal with whatever issues that we're dealing with, together.
yeah. Of course, yeah. There's so much power in unity, especially with women
Yeah.
and between women. Yeah. So okay, so we'll get into Roots introducing. So could you define home
Home for
from your
me
perspective?
is it's not necessarily a place for me personally. Like for me, home is Algiers. That's where I'm from. That's where I grew up. That's where I was born. But it's like really specific parts of my childhood and my adolescence that like when I go home and I see the same things, I'm like, okay, this is like where I belong, you know? It's not necessarily a place, it's more like memories and like nostalgia for me. I don't know if that makes sense. but yeah, that's pretty much how I would define home, is like little like scattered pieces of nostalgia.
Yeah. And what does that mean for you?
It means different things. It means that sometimes I have a hard time with change because it's memories, and because they're memories sometimes associated with things or places. And I think if you come from a developing country and if you live, you know, outside of your country of origin, sometimes you don't get to go home as often, and sometimes you don't get to relive those memories that often. And when you go back, and you see that things have changed and that it's not really the way that you remember it, you have a hard time sort of, you're kind of like, okay, where do I fit into all of this? Because so much has changed since the last time that I was here, or certain things that I associate so heavily with myself that they're not really here anymore. So it's kind of hard with that, but I mean, that's life.
Yeah, of course. So would you say that like back home is home, or have you found more of a home in the UK, or is it somewhere
back home
between?
is home for me. I mean, I grew up, I was born and raised in Algiers. I left during the Civil War, and then I grew up in the UK, and then we came back, and I left again at the end of high school to go to uni, and then I mean, it's just, there's no other, even though I've lived in other places, even though I grew up in other places, I don't feel at home the way I do when I go back home. it's
Yeah, I feel that.
I mean, you can make a home out of a place, sure. You can make friends, you have your family with you, but it's not the same thing for me personally as when I go back home. Like when I take the plane or when I take the ferry, and I see like on the ferry, like it's quite a long journey. It takes like a day to cross the Mediterranean, but once you see like the Bay of Algiers, like for me, I'm like, okay, I'm here, you know, I get teary eyed when I think about it. And then when I take the plane and I see the crescent out of the plane window, like that's my place, you know. That's the spot that I feel like this is where I belong. So it's home. Back home is home, definitely.
Yeah. And so what was it like kind of having to completely like uproot yourself during the Civil War?
I think it was probably a lot more difficult for my parents than it was for me, because I was a kid, and so it was a lot easier for me to sort of pick up the language. And then I went to school, so it's easier for me to make friends, even though it was really weird because we landed in Belfast, like, which is like, I mean, you leave a civil war to end up in a place there's still a lot of conflict going on. And we were poor, so we lived in an area where there was, you know, it was like at the crux of the conflict between nationalists and loyalists. So it wasn't really, we didn't really land in a peaceful place. But it was definitely a lot harder for my parents. Like my dad, who worked, but he didn't really speak English, and then he's very ethnic looking. So, sorry, my cat is like, sorry. He's very ethnic looking, so he was subject to a lot of racial abuse. And then my mom, who didn't speak a word of English either, and she sort of was a housewife at the same time. So it was like, it was hard. I think it was really hard for them to adapt. For me personally, I had to survive a year in Belfast, and then we moved to London, and London is very multicultural, and we lived in a place, you know, London has a very large North African community, Algerian community, and so it was a lot easier for my parents and for me then to sort of settle in. But prior to that, it was like a nightmare.
Yeah. So it must have been like refreshing sort of to move to London and to be in that kind of environment compared to Belfast. But you kind of mentioned that your dad was subject to like abuse and discrimination? Was that still as
No,
prevalent in London?
I don't think he mentioned a single
Okay.
instance of
Yeah.
racial abuse in London compared to Belfast, where I think his car was bricked while he
Yeah.
was in it. So yeah, it was pretty crazy.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was
Oh
we
my
went
God.
we went through a lot with my family, I think. But yeah, it was, I mean,
Yeah.
London is, I think it's more ethnic than not, in my opinion, from what I
Yeah,
remember.
yeah,
It was,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I think I went to a primary school where there were three white kids and everyone else was either black or South Asian or Arab or something. So it was like, it
Yeah.
was black and white compared to Belfast.
Yeah. And so did you quickly find a community in London then?
Yes, because I think the way it works with Algerians and maybe other ethnic groups is that you will sort of know someone who lives in the city, and then that person will introduce you to like every other Algerian in the city. So
Yeah.
if you
Yeah.
end up like, you know, you sort of land in one spot, and then within a month you know about 200 people, and you don't really know how that happened, but that's
Yeah.
how it works. It was harder in Belfast because Belfast at the time, I think now there's a pretty substantial Algerian community, North African community. But
Yeah.
so it was almost impossible to integrate or find a sense of community or feel like you belong.
Yeah, of course. I mean, yeah, for me, like I would kind of, I get what you mean with the community thing because every week I'd have like five new aunties that
Like,
my
you
mum
can show
just
up to your
met and that are
house and
part
it's
of the
just like, who are
family
you?
now.
Like, your
And
auntie.
yeah, yeah. Oh God. Okay, so can you define your culture or give examples of things that define your
I
culture?
don't know. I feel like for Algerians, we've been subject to so
Yeah.
many different civilizations, so that we have a specific culture, I would say, but it's like there's so many things that are like with different origins and things like that. My culture personally, my mom's family is indigenous, so we have like we have our own dress set, we have our own dresses, our traditional dresses, we have our own ways of, you know, the way we host weddings, the our language in itself, you know, everything is kind of different. And I sort of, I still
Yeah.
sort of, for me personally, grew up apart from that because, for one thing, I grew up in Algiers. I didn't grow up in my, you know, mom's family's home region. And then on top of that, I don't speak their language. So even though I went back to my ancestral village pretty often, I was always lost. People would have to like switch to Arabic to like translate stuff for me. So yeah, I wouldn't really be able to define like, I don't know if you want me to define Algerian culture or my own personal culture, but I would just say that it was like, it would be like a mix.
Your
Yeah,
personal,
it
yeah.
would be like a mix of everything
Yeah.
because I've been so heavily influenced by how I was raised and then where I grew up and what I've lived through. So I would definitely say that I'm a big mix of like several things. So there's like some Britishness, there's some Irishness, there's a lot of Algerianness, there's some even Belgian, I would say, because I've been here for quite a while, and it's just like a whole mixed bag.
Yeah. That's good though. I mean, there's beauty in like all these different kind of experiences and traditions coming
A
together
lot of conflict
as
too
well.
sometimes.
Yeah, that too. That too. Um, and so how do you navigate these cultural differences, or how do you differentiate or balance them even?
I wouldn't say that I necessarily had a lot of, how would I explain this even? I don't even know. Um, I would say that there was a lot of guilt associated with it at the beginning, and a lot of sort of, I would say, a sort of identity crisis, especially when I lived in the UK, because I moved to the UK when I was still quite young. And so my parents were
Yeah.
very insistent on the fact that I remain Algerian and that I remain Muslim and all of these things. And I sort of was
Yeah.
completely, even if there was an Algerian community, like my family, like my friends, my acquaintances outside of this sort of Algerian community were so multicultural and so different. And so I absorbed a lot of it, and it was really hard for me to then go back home and be expected to be 100% Algerian when I didn't really, when I was a kid, I didn't really go back home that often because we were refugees. I didn't go back home. I didn't go back home at all. And
Yeah.
I don't know how it was sort of expected of me to just remain this one thing that my parents expected of me when that was impossible because I didn't know what it was to be Algerian. It wasn't until I moved back home that I sort of picked that back up again. But there was a lot of expectation of me to be, especially Muslim, because my parents were like, "Oh, if she's Muslim, then it's fine, you know. She's not going to go down the wrong path. She's not going to be like too European." And that, I mean, I managed to sort of come to terms with that probably in my 20s. So I spent pretty much my entire adolescence and my entire childhood very much conflicted with religion, especially. And I think that's had sort of such a negative effect on me now in my adult life because I have such a hard time reconciling, maybe not culture, but religion. I have a hard time with that more than probably anything else.
How so?
Probably, if I was to be 100% honest, I'm very resentful of the fact that I was forced to follow certain things as a kid and to sacrifice so much of my sort of kid time. Like I couldn't play on weekends. I had to go to mosque school, and everyone else had to lie in. Like I had to go to mosque school and learn like Quran and stuff like that. And I didn't even necessarily speak Arabic, and so I have a hard time sort of. I have a lot of resentment towards that more than anything, and so I have a hard time with religion now. Although I'm trying to like work towards sort of reconciling because I still identify as Muslim. I just have a hard time practicing because a lot of it is like I would definitely say like it's entrenched in trauma, so it's just hard for me.
Yeah, of course, of course. Okay, so in terms of your Algerian culture, then what's your favorite and least favorite? Well, you've kind of touched about your least favorite elements of it. What's your favorite parts of your culture, or the parts that you miss?
Family and community. I mean, for me personally, like when I lived in Algeria, I was never just raised by my mom. You know, you're never just raised by like one person. It's really like a village, and you spend your time like sort of getting towards your aunt's house and this aunt's house, and you go to like your ancestral village where you like sleep in like 5 different houses in 1 week, and like everyone has their opinion. And that's probably like my favorite part is there's no like you don't really just have a mom or like a grandmother. It's like this entire community of women that just comes around you, and is like you're raised even in a group. You're not like a single kid. You're like you know, there's like 20 kids in one circle, like 20 aunt circles like around, and that's what I miss the most. Like that's what I miss, that I miss like, you know, going home and, you know, my grandmother's house, and like all my aunts will come with like all their kids and their grandkids and this and that, and it's like 50 people in one house, and you like you have to lay out mattresses all over the floor to the point where you, if you want to go to the bathroom at nighttime, you're like, okay, is this a head or a foot? Like, let me not step on it in case someone dies. And that's my favorite part. I miss that the most, probably. Like I miss even like with COVID now, like I missed going home this summer, and I was like, and my family, you know, life sort of went on in Algeria, and so everyone was like going back to the ancestral, was having their sleepovers, and I was like, I miss it. I want to be there, but I can't.
You reminded me of so this is kind of related to women in Arabic and Algerian cultures, and in my case like Turkish cultures, but a lot of the kind of the community is upheld by the women in these cultures, and most of the time it's in the day when like the men are traditionally working, but all the women get together and all the kids get together, and then you have this as a young girl as well, you have this community of like women to look up to, and grandmas and aunties, and that's a really beautiful part of the culture as well. And even with their relation to food, so usually traditionally they're the ones cooking and creating these kind of big meals and everything. So that would just remind me of
it's like the young kids have to do the dishes,
significant,
you know?
That is.
They're like
always the girls. Always the young girls. Okay, so we'll move on to identity and yourself. Have you experienced difficulty in finding yourself and your
Yeah.
identity because of your heritage and everything, not just in general?
Yes, I would say so. I think moving back
Yeah.
home when I was an adolescent helped me a lot because I regained my sort of sense of Algerianness, which I sort of lost during my years in the UK. So that helped me out a lot. And then when I came to Belgium, I came to Belgium as an almost adult. So I was already pretty sure of who I was and sort of where I came from. And I mean, when we left the UK, I was in tears because it was the only place I'd really ever known and had like full memory of. And I really have to thank my parents for like taking me back home, even though they took me back home as punishment for being like a bad Muslim girl.
Oh.
I have to thank them for that because I really regained a sense of myself and sort of where I belong. I think, hello? Oh, yeah, I think your image is like frozen. Oh, it's back. It's back.
Oh.
Well, where was I when it like cut
Okay,
out?
good. Carry on. Um, you were just starting to talk about leaving the London and how that was good for
Yes, it was
you,
doing
and
like it's probably the biggest
yeah.
gift that my parents accidentally got me because I regained very much a sense of
Okay.
myself and where I come from. And when I came back to Belgium, I
Yeah.
no longer had that problem. Probably because I was a lot older also. So
Yeah.
I'm in a position now where I'm like, okay, this is who I am, this is where I come from, and then like this is Belgium. But also like
Yeah.
I adopted certain Belgian things, but it's never been like a sort of there's never been a sort of conflict in terms of my sense of identity in the way that it was for me in the UK. I don't feel like I have to compromise parts of myself anymore.
Good, good. I guess part of that must come from being apart from Algeria and spending time away, and then you kind of search out that the heritage in yourself to kind of inform your identity, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I sort of when I lived in Algeria, I sort of immersed myself in it. Um, it was my first time in really my memory where I had like a whole community around me and I had like my whole family around me and stuff like that. So that, I became more interested in where I was from. Whereas when I was in the UK, I sort of pushed that away. And I sort of immersed myself in Algerian history, Algerian culture, in my own family's history, because my own family history is like kind of crazy. and and
Really?
I sort of that's what helped me sort of cement my own identity more than anything.
Yeah. Can you talk a bit about your own family history? I'm interested now.
Where do I even begin? I don't. um,
Okay, fair enough.
I could go back to this whole thing of I was raised by matriarchy. So my family was pretty. I mean, I'm not really in touch with my dad's side that much. So if I speak now, it's about only my mom's side of the family. My family. I mean, my family was very active in the sort of War of Independence. So they were very much anti-colonial from the start. And the way that sort of my family's matriarchy came about is in a very violent way, which is that my great-granddad was shot dead by the French as he was leaving his village. And he left my great-grandmother alone with 6 kids, 6 daughters only. And so they were anywhere, I think, between ages of about 6, 7 to 18. And then my 3 eldest, aunts, great aunts, I don't know how. So they then became active in the revolution themselves, despite the fact that I think one of them was like 14 or 15 at the time, and then they ended up getting married, because in Algeria at the time you got married quite young. I mean, like, they're like 11-year-old girls who were married at the time. And they had kids, whatever, and then towards the end of the conflict, I think 2 of them lost their husbands, for the same reasons. And then as time sort of went on, I don't know how to explain it. Like, I mean, they ended up being single mothers one way or another. It was either like they lost their husbands due to death, or they lost their husbands due to divorce, or just their husbands were just completely absent or disappeared or whatever. And so I ended up in a family where it was my great grandmother and then 6 aunts, no husbands, and then most of them had daughters as well. So we just like had to like it was very much like, it's very much a female dominated family. And that's also, like I said earlier, how I ended up, you know, I have such love and appreciation for Algerian women, and that then extends to North African women. They are just so resilient and so strong. And I mean, Algeria is a country that's not really for women, and it's not really a country that invites women into public space. You sort of have to be dominant enough and sort of be sure, I don't know, you have to be sturdy. I think that's literally the word that comes to mind. You have to be very sturdy and sure of yourself and dominant. And I come from a family of women who dominate. Like, they take up all of the space that they're in, and they're very unapologetic about it. And I love them for that. And I don't think I would be the person that I am today if it wasn't for them. So it's I don't really have to, I just have so much love for them and so much appreciation for them. And I mean, if I spent the rest of my life trying to honor them and honor everything that they taught me, I think that still wouldn't be enough.
That's so beautiful. That's an incredible story as well. My God.
No problem.
Thanks for sharing. Okay, so now in Belgium, have you been able to find a community there?
A North African community, or just a community?
Yeah, North African,
Funnily
Algerian.
enough, I'm actually not that connected to the North African community here. I have my own community of friends that are of different origins, and it's so strange because North African community, that's a pretty significant one here, but I just feel like there's such how do I say this? I'm very respectful of the way people choose to live their lives, but I find myself constantly in a situation where the same is not, I mean, that's not extended, that's not reciprocated, if you will. And so, and so I choose to be sort of select who I let into my space. And a lot of the times, it's not North Africans, so I don't know what to tell you. I'm fine with North Africans. I have literally like a whole North African community outside of Belgium that I get along with just fine, but I don't know what it is here that something just doesn't click. And it's a shame, because I sort of sometimes I end up in situations where I sort of have to explain my culture, and I know that with other, you know, North African friends I wouldn't really have to do that, but it is what it is.
All right. So how would you define diaspora?
What a question. Diaspora.
In your experience of
diaspora for me is, in my experience, someone who is away from home, and it's not always necessarily a choice for them to live where they live, if that makes sense. It's I mean, like, I'm not really in exile, but I am, because I would do anything to live home. I would do anything to be back, but it's just the way my country is set up, the way the government is set up, the way, you know, the futures of people of my generation is set up. It's just almost not possible to be home. And so I mean, I have a choice, you know, there's no war going on, there's no conflict going on, I could go back anytime, but I just not sure that that would be the best thing for me personally. So diaspora for me is someone who is here, and it's like not like a choice for them, do you know what I mean? Even though it is.
Yeah, yeah. And you kind of touched on it, but how was that experience of living in a diaspora affected you? Kind of more so now than growing
Now,
up.
how do I say this? In Belgium, most people my age are like third, fourth, fifth generation immigrants who, in my opinion, they're very a lot of the times they're lost. This is from what I've seen and what I've experienced. A lot of times they're lost because they're in a situation where they don't necessarily, they've never lived back home. They come from families who, I mean, their parents sometimes have never lived back home. And so they have this entire separate identity from someone like me who's like first generation. That makes sense. And I think they're in a position where they're made to feel like they don't fully belong here, even though this is where they were born and raised. And when they go back home, they don't speak the language, they don't fully understand the culture. And this isn't like me critiquing them or anything like that. I feel like this is just the situation. And they're in a spot where they have a hard time, like I did when I lived in the UK, of sort of putting the two identities together. And so what they've come up with is sort of like this weird separate identity where they cling on to being North African so much because they're not accepted as anything else. But then at the same time, they don't really have an idea really of what that is. Create like these weird boxes. My apologies, my throat is really dry all of a sudden. I cannot speak. They create these weird boxes where
no worries.
They create these weird boxes where they're like, to be North African you have to be like this, or to be like North African you have to be like this, and it's like you're just North African, like this is what you are. You don't have to be a certain way or do a certain thing or act a certain way, but they feel like that's what they have to do. And so they end up creating these weird separate identities, and I don't identify with that, and I have a hard time sort of relating to them, that the fact that they're just of North African origin is enough. So I have
Does that does that stem from like religious reasons, or is that,
I think it's just
more of a cultural kind of struggle?
I think it's both. I think it's both. I think they have a hard time sort of putting their own, creating their own sort of identity, because they don't really have the space in a society that's like, you know, in France or in Belgium, where you're made to feel like you're completely foreign and really you belong here. Sorry, I'm struggling. Can I go get some water, please?
Do you want to get some water?
I'll be back in like 2 seconds. Sorry.
Yeah, don't worry. Bless you. So you guys that are here, if you want to send in any questions, just for towards the end of the episode, that'll be great. There's a little question box at the bottom where you can send them in. I don't know if your screen's the same as mine, but it appears there for me.
All right, I'm back. My throat was struggling so much. Like I was like,
you're right.
Like,
no, don't worry.
I'm back though.
Bless you. Okay, great. So the next question is about kind of third culture, and I kind of define third culture is in between your heritage and where you've lived and this thing that you kind of create personally. Do you have any examples of things that have like manifested from your third culture and things that are part of your daily life?
I think I adopted a lot of Britishness when I lived in the UK, in the sense that I feel like I feel like Brits are not very emotional people, like not outwardly, if you know what I mean. And I adopted that, and then I'm sort of like that myself. I don't really show that much emotion in general, other than like happiness and anger. I don't, you know. And I moved to Algeria, where everyone is like dramatic, like all the time. They make their emotions known immediately, and then in Belgium, I think it's sort of the same as well. So it's hard for me sometimes to, you know, people don't understand me, that they think I'm cold and like I have like this like, you know, mask on and I don't really show emotion, and sometimes I think they mistake that with, oh, she doesn't have emotion. But that's not really the case at all. It's just that I think I'm a little too British sometimes with that.
Yeah, we've been conditioned by the British.
That's pretty much it, yeah.
Okay, great. So that's all my questions for your kind of the first introducing interview. I just want to ask a bit about Women of North Africa. So what are your plans moving forward? What are some kind of things that you want to achieve, or long-term plans for the platform?
I really would like it to be like a resource and a safe space for North African women. My goal, probably not ultimately, but one of my big goals long term, is to turn it into a revenue source, so I can pay everyone who contributes. I don't like asking people to work for free, and I feel like people deserve to get paid what they're worth. So that's my goal.
Yeah. Okay, and will you be kind of having any events or that is anything like that?
Well, right now the website is down because I'm trying to sort of launch a Women of North Africa 2.0. So that's like my goal right now, is to relaunch it, and then afterwards, we'll see. I have a lot of ideas. It's just sometimes time and financially, it's, you know, my is a little too ambitious compared to my bank account, and so my bank account is like, no, I don't think that's gonna happen this way. But
I relate to that.
So yeah, that's my goal, is to just, you know, set up something that, you know, would allow me to pay everyone involved, and then also, you know, catch up to my own mind, sort of. And that's just the goal, and that's what I'm planning long term. Short term is the relaunch.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for your time.
Really nice. I'm sorry about my throat.
It's been really lovely to chat. Don't worry,
my throat like gave out on me halfway.
No, don't worry, honestly. Is there anything else that you'd like to discuss or plug, or
no. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys are planning on doing with your project, because I think it's really interesting. I like that it's like very general, sort of roots, diaspora kind of publication. I think there's not enough of those, you know. There's a few that popped up over the past couple of years, but I feel like a few isn't enough, you know. I feel like everyone needs their own kind of space, and I'll be watching.
We'll be watching Women of NA as well.
You too.
Great. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
It was
Bye.
lovely to chat.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.